So we have really just an outstanding lineup of members that are going to be talking to you this morning. And they will be, the mistress of ceremony is going to be a great friend, and that is Mary Bono. As you know, Mary is a member of the CATCA's Board of Directors. She will moderate our panel this morning, and she served, as most of you know, in the House of Representatives, starting in 1998, representing the 45th District of California. She quickly became an outstanding leader in Congress and a respected one on a wide range of responsibilities and critical important issues facing our country. She, during her 8 terms in Congress, provided great leadership to help this country address, understand, and fight and push back against the misuse and abuse of prescription drugs, among many other public health concerns. I first met her when I was testifying before her in the House of Congress. I will tell you she was and continues to be a very challenging, demanding leader, but one that has great passion and great understanding and vision. We have been blessed to have her, after leaving Congress, to become a part of our movement and to serve as a member of our board of directors. So we're lucky to have her. We're excited that she's going to lead our discussion this morning. And Mary, would you please join me on this stage?
Thank you, General Dean.
Great to have you. Thank you.
General Dean goes for the handshake, I go in for the hug. Good morning, everybody. I have been so excited to see what I look like as a cartoon character all day since I saw yesterday's presentation. It really is so exciting to be here year after year. I love this conference. I love being with all of you. I feel like I'm family. I've known many of you from events around the country, so it's great to be back with you. But today we've got a really great group of Hill champions who focused on alcohol, drug prevention, treatment, and recovery. They've all produced meaningful legislation that makes a positive difference in people's lives. But it should come as no surprise that the people who recruited these great champions are you during your Hill Day visits, what you're going to do later today. These are why these great people are here today. You know, these members recognize that we need to prioritize investment at our community levels, and that with those people, we have the very most power to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. But before I start introducing our esteemed panel, I just wanted to point out, when you walk into the room, you walk smack dab into Hawaii. Is there anybody here from Hawaii? I just want to know, so you guys are so dedicated and passionate, you leave Hawaii in the middle, early February to come to Washington, D.C.? Thank you, and thank you to my California folks. Anybody from California? They're in the back because they're the rowdy kids. The Californians and Hawaiians deserve special recognition because their time zones are all totally whacked out. So on that note, I'm going to introduce a woman whose time zone should be kind of whacked out, but it's not. She's been in Congress long enough and done the transcontinental flight week after week after week to get back to Washington and back to California. Our first member of Congress to join us on stage is Congresswoman Lucille Roybal Allard. She is the member from the 40th District of California. Congresswoman, if you can start making your way up, because we put them down there to see the video, and so now they've got the long walk up here. But so she's a major champion for the substance abuse prevention field. She co-sponsored landmark legislation in support of reducing underage drinking, including the Sober Truth on Preventing Underage Drinking Act, which was passed in 2006. She is a longtime friend of CADCA, and we're happy to have her back. Please help me welcome Congresswoman Roybal Allard. It's a bipartisan group we have today. That's great news and very encouraging for us all. Congressman Bob Dole represents the 10th District of Illinois. He was elected in 2010 and then again in 2014, and actually whoever wrote this forgot to say he was elected in between, but that's okay. Congressman Dole has established himself as a passionate advocate for the prevention field. He has supported numerous pieces of legislation related to substance abuse prevention and has been a vocal backer of the Drug-Free Communities program. Please welcome our good friend, Congressman Bob Dole. And then one of my favorite Democrats, and I don't say that to whatever Democrat is in front of me. I actually mean this. One of my very favorite Democrats is Congressman Paul Tonko, who represents the 20th District of New York. Congressman Tonko was elected to Congress in 2009. He's been a strong supporter of substance abuse and mental health parity in Congress. The congressman sponsored Timothy's Law, an important measure of the New York State Assembly that called for parity-based mental health and addiction treatment insurance coverage. Congressman Tonko is also a vice co-chair of the Congressional Addiction Treatment and Recovery Caucus. He is receiving CADCA's Congressional Leadership Award this year. Please welcome Congressman Tonko. Back to my side of the aisle, we have Congressman Evan Jenkins. He represents West Virginia's 3rd Congressional District. Congressman Jenkins was first elected to Congress in 2014. He's just a baby. He has been active and vocal in raising awareness about combating substance abuse, including efforts to tackle the prescription drug and heroin abuse crisis in his state of West Virginia and throughout the country. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Jenkins. California, I can't hear you clapping back there. Stay awake, thank you. Okay, and last but not least, Congresswoman Susan Brooks represents Indiana's 5th Congressional District. Prior to being elected to Congress in 2012, Representative Brooks was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Indiana and helped to battle drug trafficking, among many other issues. Congresswoman Brooks is receiving CADCA's Congressional Leadership Award also this year for her strong support of substance abuse prevention issues in Congress. Mark my words, Susan Brooks might be the 1st or 2nd female president of the United States. 1st or 2nd, who knows?
Yeah, very.
I believe in her. I believe in her. She's just incredible, and she's so mad at me, I'm sure, for saying that. She's going to egg my house on the way home. But now that you've been able to meet them all, we're going to move to the round table discussion. I'm going to scoot over there. The questions are kind of simple and kind of similar, but they're important. The questions really base around why are you here and how do these great advocates make the most of their time. So I'm here. Okay. So welcome. First question, and I don't know how to choose, but I'll start with Lucille if you're ready.
Okay.
Okay, so why did you choose to focus on this issue that is so important to everybody in the crowd, or these issues? I know you and I worked on the STOP Act so many years ago as a proud Republican co-sponsor of your legislation. I know you need help with co-sponsors. Can you talk about your passion and why you're here and why you focus so much work on this and how we get the STOP Act passed?
Okay. Well, in my other life, before politics, I actually worked in alcohol and drug programs. And I saw firsthand, I saw firsthand how devastating and destructive alcohol and drug abuse was, not only to the individual, but to the entire family, particularly children, and how sometimes there was that cycle that continued where parents were alcoholics, and then it went down to the children, and then as they grew up, they became alcoholics. And the results many times was not just the dysfunction of the family, but resulted in domestic violence and so many other things. And so when I went into the state legislature and then here into Congress, I looked for an area where I felt that I could make a difference, where I thought that maybe not enough was being done at the federal level. And so as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I got language into the Labor H bill that the IOM would do a study on the underage drinking. And then as a result of that study, that's the Institute of Medicine, it really was a landmark study that had never been done in our nation. I used that information to draft the original Stop Act. And I just want to say to the audience, just the little bit of time that I worked in this area, I really want to commend everybody in this audience for the work that they do every single day on the front lines.
Can I just follow-up question before we go down the line? So the STOP Act, the STOP Act is critically important and bipartisan. Is there a way the audience can help you with the STOP Act?
Well, absolutely. The STOP Act, the original bill passed in 2006, and now it's up for reauthorization. And we have about 77 co-sponsors right now. We need to get at least up to 100 in order for Energy and Commerce to even consider the bill in committee. And so this is a critical role that you can all play when you go to the Capitol Hill, is to encourage my colleagues to be co-sponsors of the STOP Act. It is a bipartisan bill. Mike Fitzgerald is my Republican co-sponsor. He's done a wonderful job, but we need more sponsors in order to get Energy and Commerce to consider the bill. So that is a key role that you can play, because you are critical to our effort to get these co-sponsors and to get the bill passed.
Thank you. So, Congressman Dole, want to take a crack at why you're involved and,
Sure.
and why you wanted to make this important?
Well, first thing, let me just jump on what Lucille had said in terms of all of you. I want to thank you for the work that you do each and every day. You're the real champions on the ground. And I will tell you that, I come from the state of Illinois, and there are a couple of my heroes right in the back there that really day in and day out are doing everything they can in the community to make a difference. So first, I want to thank you for taking your time and your resources to come to Washington to advocate on something that is near and dear to all of us. One of the things that I think is interesting is that there's not a single person that I meet that hasn't had their lives impacted by a loved one or someone that is close to them that has been impacted by either alcohol or drug abuse. Interesting thing to note as we look at heroin, prescription drug abuse, and this epidemic that is going on. Lake County, Illinois, one of the worst counties in the entire country in terms of heroin abuse. And we're losing, every 3 days, someone overdoses in heroin in a Chicago suburb. Every 3 days. That is accelerating, not decelerating. And that's why this truly is something that we cannot sit idly by. This is not somebody else's problem. This is our problem. And so the reason why this is a priority, the reason why we jump into this, largely is because constituents not only came and said, what are you going to do to help? But it was one of those that right there in front of us is something that we have to do. One of the things that we were able to do in back home in the Chicago suburbs is outfit every first responder with naloxone. And that happened, and since yeah, absolutely. Since December of 2014 to date, we have been able to save over 49 lives. And that's just in basically one county. One county, 49 lives. Obviously, you magnify that over the counties across our country. Our ability to be able to give people a second chance on life is pretty significant. So the reason isn't why are you engaged. The reason to talk to the people you're talking today is why are you not engaged? This is an epidemic and a problem that, frankly, is not partisan, right? This knows no political boundary. This is about how do we, as a community, come together and solve this problem. And so that's why, you're going to find a number of different bills on Capitol Hill to try to tackle certain problems, whether it be funding mechanisms of drug-free community grants and those types of things, which, again, we were able to increase funding, but that only does a little bit, right? The real work happens back home with each and every one of you. And so I'm excited about some of the things that are going on. And And honestly, I look at some of the things that are happening in Gloucester, Mass, with some of the police force over there in terms of how they're treating folks that, come into the police station. If you have a heroin problem, we're not going to put you in jail. We're actually going to try to see about getting you treatment. That's something that I hope it can be replicated. We're trying to do that in Lake County, Illinois right now, under the leadership of Bill Gentis and Bruce Johnson and others. So that's the reason why we're doing it.
Thank you. Congressman Tonko.
Hey, Mary, good morning. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for being such caring souls. It all begins with connecting to the policy process, and it begins with a connection that's real, that you see each and every day, that you work to improve the lot of so many people out there. So I do want to thank each and every one of you for being a force. There's a message here, it's resounding, and it's going to move policy, and it's going to advance resources. So thank you for the empowerment that you're bringing. To your question, Mary, my connection really began, segued by mental health parity. And a young man who I knew through the baseball Little League program was triply diagnosed with illness and disorder. And was on a roller coaster ride of services. When his thresholds would be met, his decline would begin. And he lost his battle. He completed suicide, and I committed to his family to make certain that his life was not lost on all of us, but that he died to motivate and inspire us. And he did. Timothy Eau Claire became the namesake for mental health parity legislation that is now law in the state of New York, the first state to move in such a manner that inspired the federal response. And, getting invested with that emotionally and politically was a growing curve for me. I could not believe how people from every corner of New York would call us and say just the fear of not getting the legislation passed was enough to set them back in their efforts for recovery or addressing their illness or disorder. And so it was there that I grew a more passionate understanding of how important it is to address mental health, the diseases of that are mental health related, and the disease of addiction. The disease of addiction and alcoholism. We need to see it as such, or we'll never be successful. And so as I was brought into some of the ancillary pieces of the mental health arena, including addiction, substance use and abuse, alcoholism, my interest only grew because there were so many battles to be waged. And, through that, you open yourself to many discussions and many friendships that develop with the addicted community, and they have become truly my role models, my heroes. When I look at the fortitude, the resilience, the courage, the ability to live hour to hour, there's no more powerful statement that can come your way. And the respect and the dignity that should be afforded that community is what drives me to fight for legislation that will truly make a difference. And to fund programs, fund them, not talk about them, fund them, is important to me. And then issues where you've seen personal cases hit really close to home. A neighbor who grew up on my street recently lost his battle with addiction to heroin. A dad of 3, a professional who just reminded me that the fight is there. The fight is there for the courageous who are trying to escape the web of addiction, and so we need to be there with equal levels of courage to make a difference in the halls of government. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman.
Thank you, Mary. I can tell why he's getting an award today.
Thank you.
Our great West Virginia delegation is on the front row over here. And I think it's symbolic because we're on the front row, not only with having some tragically, our nation's leading statistics in a bad way, but also on the front row of doing some really impressive things to tackle the disease of addiction. I live in Huntington, West Virginia. In 2015, our community of 48,000 people was on track of having 1,000 overdose. Is it a crisis? Is it an epidemic? Hell yes. 1,000 people out of a 48,000 population community. We are on the front row, on the front lines, and we've got some awesome advocates doing stunning work. Mary's question to me was kind of, how did you come to this fight? Well, let me mention just 2 or 3 things. Number one, like many here, we started off in our legislative roots at the State House. And I served 18 years in our West Virginia legislature. And West Virginia was on the front row of the experience early on of the prescription drug crisis that migrated into heroin use. So I saw from a policy making, rubber meets the road, those state policy initiatives that really can make a difference. How do you use your prescription monitoring program? Can you allow people to buy drugs, prescription drugs at a pharmacy with cash? What sort of requirements on notification and if a third person picks up a drug? What sort of reporting requirements for prescribers to the PMP? I could go on, but those are where the rubber meets the road of how the whole process takes place. So this was a passion for me as a legislator. Secondly, I served 15 years as the director of our state medical association in West Virginia. Yes, the physicians, and yes, a lot of the concerns and challenges start with that pen and that prescription pad. So I took the public policy hat and the advocacy hat and said, wait a minute, docs. The people out there are pointing their fingers at you at being part of the problem. You need to be part of the solution. Take a leadership role. Take an ownership role. Step up to the plate. So I had the honor of working with our prescribers, our medical community. Yes, we passed mental health parity in West Virginia. We've done a number of things because it's the right thing to do. But one of my passions is driving the medical community to be part of the solution and not sit idly by and say it's somebody else's problem. Because the reality check, when I looked at a doctor and said, you better get engaged, you better be part of the solution because you are not going to like the medicine that is delivered to you because the public won't stand idly by allowing what's happening to happen. The third area is personal because, and we're going to talk about champions and leadership and leaders here, but I had the honor of getting a phone call from 2 NICU nurses at Capitol Huntington Hospital about 5-6 years ago because they were seeing this stunning increase of the incidence of neonatal abstinence syndrome, drug withdrawing newborns. And so I went and met with them, and they went out to Kent, Washington and saw the PIC Center there. They came back and said, Evan, we want to start a facility to put together in our community a facility that will take care of these newborn infants in the right kind of care environment, appropriate medical care oversight, do it in a cost-effective way, a caring way to give these newborn infants a healthy start in life. NAS is a passion of mine, and I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to give you more details about it. But I helped lead the effort to put what is now in West Virginia law, a licensure process. You want to try to start a new healthcare structure delivery system and go through all the burdens and hoops of the regulatory licensing, it is like pulling your hair out. So we'll talk about what we're doing in Congress, and I too will give you a bill number to take to the Hill and champion for co-sponsors for the Cradle Act. So, legislative experience, working with the healthcare provider community, and championing, trying to take care of our newborn infants that are ravaged with the challenges of withdrawal in those first days and weeks of life. It is a passion of mine. It is something that each and every one of us gets up with something that drives us. So again, like others have said up here, thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you do. Finally, we are starting to see the rallying and the awareness, things that you've known and been frustrated with for years. Keep up the good work, and thank you for what you do. God bless.
Congresswoman Brooks.
Thank you, Mary, and good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Now, I may not look like someone who has probably visited more prisons and more jails than most of the folks in this room, but that's because when I started out the practice of law 30 years ago, I was a criminal defense attorney. And as a criminal defense attorney, for 13 years, I visited prisons and jails and represented individuals, family members like your own, maybe some of you, who actually had been arrested for substance abuse or crimes involving alcohol. And I saw how crowded and how horrible lives would become because of the devastation of addiction. And then later on, when I became U.S. Attorney in the Bush administration, I worked hand in hand with DEA, FBI, local law enforcement. And we did what we could do, and we fought hard to break up all of those major drug trafficking organizations and to work hard to give law enforcement the resources they need to try to keep the drugs from coming into our communities and, feeding the addictions. But what I've come to realize, and now I'm a second-term member of Congress, is, and many law enforcement know this, we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. We cannot arrest our way out of it. Many, many years ago, and I was really pleased to see, I was on the board of Drug-Free Marion County. And so Drug-Free Marion County saw Randy Miller here, the executive director there, and he's still at it. So I have been on boards like the groups that you were all affiliated with, working day in and day out to think about how do we prevent this scourge of addiction. And we're learning so much more. Because of medicine and because of research, we are learning so much more. And so it is because of CADCA and groups like this that are changing the discussion finally after decades. I've been at this for decades, changing the discussion and getting people to realize the importance of drug treatment courts, the importance of prevention, the importance of starting young, and talking about these issues at a very young age. And we have to. In the state of Indiana, and Evan just reminded me of something going on in our state, and I just want to share this with you. How many of you have heard of Austin, Indiana, Little Scott County, Indiana? Down in southern Indiana, and I'm new on Energy and Commerce Committee, and we've had our director of state health director come and testify. In a community of 4,500 people, a very small town in southern Indiana, we have 182 cases of HIV. Now, how did that happen? Drug use, needle exchange, needle sharing, rather. And because of needle sharing and because of the opioid and the heroin addiction in small little Scott County, Indiana, we now have the largest epicenter of HIV in the world. In the world. And let me just tell you, the kids that go to high school there, they see needles, dropped all over in their high schools or in their community, out on the streets. They don't want to be that community or graduating from that high school that is known for that in our state and around the country. And so CDC everyone came together to try to focus on this horrible public health epidemic. Well, we've now got Hep C outbreaks up in a community in my district. So this problem of drug addiction, which as you've heard is killing so many people day in and day out. I talked with an IMPD officer in Indianapolis who said he had saved the same guy 3 weeks in a row with Narcan, okay? So we're not there. Narcan's critically important, but this is such a huge problem that we've got to stay very focused. And you coming to the Hill and talking with everybody, because every member of Congress needs to understand this problem better than I think they do. Every member of Congress doesn't have the passion we all do. And I know we're going to get into this, but tell the story. And I'm just going to close with when I walked in, I was reminded of the story. This is not a story. My law school classmate, Judge Bill Nelson, and his wife Christy are here. Bill, would you stand up? Judge Nelson and his wife Christy lost their son to drug overdose. And let me just tell you, they have been champions. And many of you could stand up as well. Tell your stories. It makes a difference. And your involvement, pull in everyone who's been affected by drug addiction because they don't like talking about it when it's their family. But when you've got leaders like Bill and Christy Nelson in our communities telling their story, it's then okay to come out of the shadows and to share. And that's why I'm here. So thank you.
It's interesting, I'm always given a list of questions and they answer them all within the first statement. So I kind of get to ad-lib from here on out. But following on your statement, Susan, so for those who didn't know, that the reason I became involved because I too had a child who started using prescription drugs in high school. And then I I joined the journey, and I really didn't know about the epidemic at that time because it was just starting. This is 12 years ago. But then I learned it was already alive and well in Appalachia, and I joined forces with Hal Rogers, and I became a very passionate advocate within the Congress. And I spoke out publicly, and even had some constituents yell at me and say, that drug-addicted child of yours. So I was never afraid, though, to remove the stigma and to talk about my family's journey. But so my question to you is, how can they be most effective in your offices and the people who are not yet paying attention? Is it just the stories, or do they need to prove like community-based prevention treatments work? We have the data to show that. Is it a combination of two, or how do you think they're going to go in and win that congressman over who's not yet on board and doesn't somehow know about this epidemic that we're faced with?
Very briefly, I think it's a combination of both. I do think it is telling stories and making it very personal and just humanizing what the issue is, but then also just presenting any data you might have, any analysis you might have, talking about the programs that work, and making sure that they understand what the member of Congress could specifically do. And going in with lists of bills to co-sponsor, that's always very helpful. It helps their offices do that work, but I do think it's a combination of both.
Anybody want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, no, I just want to use the STOP Act as an example. Since the passage of the STOP Act, underage drinking has been declining in this country. And the use by 8th, 10th, and 12th graders is the lowest it has been since CDC has been collecting data, which was in 1991. So that's something that you can use, and it's because of your efforts that this is happening. And again, I can't say it enough, and I know we all keep repeating it. The success that we're seeing is because of you and because of your work and because of your advocacy. And we still have a long way to go. And I agree with Susan. I think some of the most powerful things are your personal stories. That helps to make a difference, backed up with the data as to why the legislation that my colleagues and I are supporting is so important. And so I encourage you to just go to Washington. We, members of Congress, sometimes I hear, well, I don't know, we feel very uncomfortable, talking to members of Congress. We don't know what to say. Hey, we're just like all of you. We could tell our own stories. You've heard ours. Yeah. I've had a drug addiction in my family, heroin addiction. And I saw how devastating it was to not only, again, the individual, but what it did to my sister and to her family, and is still doing, because it's something that you just don't deal with drug addiction and you get off of heroin or whatever the drug is and everything's fine. It is a struggle you deal with every single day, every minute of the day. And so, yes, tell your personal stories. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a disease.
Mary,
a disease that impacts everyone.
I'll take a quick stab also. In addition to those two great suggestions, let me add another two. First, this is about relationships. You've got to get to know your member of Congress. You've got to get the community of advocates to know their member of Congress. And also, this is a process. It's not a conclusion. It is awesomely powerful to come once a year, twice a year to Washington and rally on the Hill and make the calls. But that's just part of the process. It's not a conclusion. So one, build a relationship with your member of Congress, both when we're up here, but candidly, more importantly, when you're back in district. Have them come to a youth center, a program, event, an occasion. Because when you have, like my group down here, we know them all by name, they know me by name. I see them on the streets, I see them in the grocery store. So have that relationship. But also, it's the accountability. Yes, ask for somebody to co-sponsor a bill today, but call their legislative assistant next week. Did the member co-sponsor it? No? Oh, really? Why not? Call them next month. We're following up from our visit last month. Did he sign on? Well, no. Well, really? We're getting ready to put out a newsletter to all the folks in our community. Just wanted to make sure we had the most up-to-date accountability. Polite persistence. Don't get mad about it. Don't get angry. Do not get threatening. But go at it in a positive, constructive, but an accountable way. That's what keeps us awake at night, is getting that phone call and say, oh God, I hate to tell them I haven't done something I promised to do. Yeah. Relationships and accountability.
Can I just add to that? In addition to getting to know your member, get to know their staff. We depend a lot on our staff, and a lot of times, even though you may not be able to meet with us personally, and you meet with our staffs, they provide us with the information that you give them. So get to know the staff, because the staff can be very influential in keeping us on track, because we have so many things that we deal with.
Some may even say the staff is more effective.
Yes, absolutely.
The staff says that anyway.
I won't quite go that far, but one of the things that I think is important as we talk about today is, yes, we're just like you, and the other thing that's important is we work for you, right? Never forget that too. The most effective lobbying that happens on Capitol Hill, I would argue, isn't from the professional lobbyists that walks the halls each and every day. It's from those of you that have taken your time and your resources to come to Washington to advocate on something that you're passionate about. I couldn't agree more with all that's been said, and I also would agree, yes, you want to build your relationship, because the advocacy doesn't stop today. Back in your district, make sure that they're coming to the event. Make sure that they understand about whatever the next thing that you're doing, whether it be at the shelter, whether it be on the next drug-free community event that's going on. You want to make sure that they're engaged, because frankly, when they get to come to those events, they get to have those other touches of people in their community that are also being impacted. So this should be an ongoing thing for each and every one of you. And the other thing that I will say, yes, hold them accountable, but come back to the people here and say, this person said that they would co-sponsor this bill or that bill, so that the group here can also try to hold them accountable. And also, if there are members that you think are having, not getting there, also bring that information back, because hopefully they're going to let us know, and we're going to be able to see them on the floor and say, hey, what's the story? Is there something that you don't understand, or can I help educate you on this as to why you should be there? So you can be a huge help to all of us in terms of what we can be doing to try to drive legislation. And the last thing I will say is all the legislation that has been introduced up here, this isn't all the legislation. A lot of the ideas and stuff are driven from you and what you think that we can and should be doing to try to make life easier or to come up with a solution to a problem. So please make sure that you're also feeding that information into your member of Congress as well.
Mary, if I might. When we talk about politics, just know it's nothing more, nothing less than the science of people. And so good dialogue, good conversation, civil exchange is absolutely important. But know that we're asked to address a plethora of issues, a ton of things that come across our plate each and every day. So go in with the awareness, the self-awareness that you know a lot more about this than we do. You see it every day. You're a frontline operator. You know the stories that fill your heart. You know the efforts needed to be achieved that fill your soul. You're coming in empowered with that. And don't be afraid to exchange it with us and with staff. And I agree wholeheartedly with my good friend Lucille about the staff element. Jeff Morgan's seated here in the front row. Jeff, give a wave. I just am so thrilled to have Jeff on my crew. He has developed passion for these issues, and you know, we all get invested with this. But when you come in and have that conversation, put that face on the discussion. Don't let this whole budgeting exercise or policy exercise turn into bean counting or ledgers or whatever. It is human lives. We all know that, but just remind us, give us those stories that really motivate the conversation. And then the seal the deal piece. You know, countless times, advocates and lobbyists will come into the office saying, we visited so many offices and everybody's on board. I said, did you seal the deal? Because in this town, they're going to tell you we can't afford it. And I say, what's the price of not doing it? What's the price of not addressing these issues? So don't let us wiggle away, or don't let it go with silence, because that is deafening. Seal the deal. Will you, thank you for your support, Congresswoman, thank you for your support, Congressman, will you now commit to the revenues to achieve the goal? That's a big question that needs to be asked. And seal the deal. Because you know what? We're the richest nation in the world, and we have 80% of the world's heroin that we're consuming. So this rich nation better be there for its people to solve the problems and address the addiction.
Before I go on much further, just a point of personal privilege, as we say, can we just applaud all of the staff members who are here in the room today?
Mary, have them stand.
Would you please stand up so
Stand up.
they can
Stand
see
up,
you
John.
and applaud you again?
Come on, Debbie.
Debbie, John. And I'm glad that they made the point, because I try to do this every year. When you get to the Hill, these folks may or may not be called to a vote, and it's heartbreaking when they're gone and you don't get to see them. But getting to know the staff members, legislative assistants, directors, we affectionately call them staffers, is critically important to you. Get to know them well and be nice to them, but they really do make the world turn. So thank you for everything you all do. So on that note, I'm so excited to see that every presidential campaign is talking about these topics. And I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about this. Did we ever think we would see the day? And thank God we are. But will this last? Will they continue to campaign on these issues that we all care so much about? And how can these folks actually guarantee that the presidential candidates do talk about these questions? And are any of you running for president?
I think it's the partnership that the legislative branch needs to have with the executive branch. And again, when people state something, when they commit to a cause, I think that's the open door. Connect and say, hey, look, I'm co-chair of the Addiction Caucus in the House. Hey, I'm on Energy and Commerce. Whatever the connection is, make it. Seal that deal and start working with the new president, whoever she or he may be, and make certain that we go forward and continue that discussion that was out there on the campaign trail. You know, to look at something like the Substance Abuse Treatment and Prevention Grant Program, and to understand that it's been cut by 25% over the last decade is unacceptable. So now let's take the rhetoric and put it into action. You know, the fact that we may have to lift caps, those data 200 caps, with the TREAT Act, so that more people are available as clinicians to address concerns out there for the addicted. Let's make that happen. Let's go forward with more education of those who are prescribing prescription drugs. Let's make certain that we go forward with that agenda based on their rhetoric on the campaign trail, and yet keep the message moving, keep it moving forward.
Yeah, Mary, one thing that I'll say with regard to why this issue, I think, has come up across the board is because it is such a big issue. And I think, obviously, the advocacy that's going on here is obviously resonating. And frankly, this is something that, again, we cannot shy away from. This is something that is impacting every single human out there has someone that has been, afflicted by addiction. And this is not something that's going away and requires real leadership from the grassroots level all the way on up. And so I hope that this is not something that is going to go away. In fact, I'm quite certain that it's not. And it's really up to all of us to make sure that it doesn't. So I'm delighted to hear that the presidential candidates across the board are talking about this. This is something that not only we need to talk about, we need to really start rolling up our sleeves and coming up with solutions, whether it be on funding certain things, or really trying to make sure that we are addressing the problems, because the problems are increasing. And last point of privilege is, we talked about our staff just a little bit ago. I'm getting the hook from my staff that's saying we're already late to go for a markup back in the Hill. So the Illinois folks, I look forward to seeing you later, and I want to thank you, Mary, for your leadership on stuff. Just as an aside, one of my memories of Mary back on the Hill was we had the FDA director for a short meeting, and Mary was literally giving her 60, basically saying, why in the world for opiates is it okay to prescribe for moderate to severe pain? It should be for severe pain only. And literally, she was like a dog on a bone and would not let the director off the leash with regard to why in the world we weren't able to change this. Still hasn't been changed, and frankly something that we need to change, but I want to thank Mary for her leadership and continued leadership on this issue.
Thank you. With that statement, we'll forgive your absence, but yeah, it was kind of a pit bull at that meeting. It was amazing bipartisanship, but we came together with great voice. But yesterday, big announcement out of the White House. We're going to send over $1 billion to this, and obviously the devil's always in the details. Those of us here are concerned that we firmly believe in community-based prevention efforts. How can you shape the White House's announcement yesterday to make sure that folks like this continue to do what they do so well and successfully? Will you be able to shape this and shape what's going to go forth? The great news out of the White House yesterday.
Well,
these are not on their list. I am stumping them. I'm having so much fun. They were all
Lucille,
giving these beforehand.
Sit over here? Okay.
Oh,
So we're all together here.
oh, no, it's us against me against them.
It's a team. It's a team.
It's a fair fight now. I'll take a quick stab at it, Mary. Let me make one quick comment about the presidential. This is they talk about the arts and the science. These folks running for president, and candidly people running for Congress, you have a pretty good sense of the pulse, whether it be through town hall meetings, through polling, what's on people's mind. And the candidates are a reflection of that. Shame on you as a candidate if you're talking about A and everybody in the world's talking about B. Well, guess what? Everybody in the world is talking about this issue. You've been talking about it for years, so it is now up there on the radar screen as a topic worthy and needing and desperately calling for attention. So thank goodness the presidential candidates are addressing it.
Mary, I think that it's important to take that good news and work it into its max. And we have folks, I'm sure they're here today, like Margie from our Niskiuna Community Action Program, and Davia from the Troy Anti-Drug Coalition. They have produced resoundingly strong results. I keep in touch with my townships, my cities. They have fed me data on the calls for overdose and the deaths related. You get that all together and you start talking about programs that are working but just need additional funds that could do even greater things. And I think, again, just exchanging the information that's out there and letting them know, look, we're pleased that you've announced this sort of an appropriation. Let's take that investment and make it get its greatest return. And we can do that by sharing information from the districts we represent. I'm certain there are tremendous success stories in this room.
Susan?
I'll just share, I was really pleased because yesterday Speaker Ryan had a meeting with the President, had their first meeting to talk about really substantive issues, and substance abuse and mental health issues were on that agenda. Now, my guess is that has not always been on the agenda in the past. And so your work, and it has to start at the local level, of course, but focusing, as we have focused very much in Indiana, on these issues. So don't minimize your work at the local level, at the state level, as Evan has been, talking about, and keeping the focus there, and then continuing the discussion. But we have to have the leadership at the White House, and that's what I hope that as you're looking, for a presidential candidate to support. And I have to tell you, I was just in Iowa. Anyone from Iowa here? Probably they're trying to get here, probably. All right. My first time to caucus, or to be at a caucus. I didn't get to caucus, but first time to caucus for a candidate. And what I was amazed by is people are still looking. And in Iowa, on the day of the caucus, they'd been listening to lots of folks. They still weren't sure, many on that day, who they were going to support. And so people are looking for that issue that they know they care about. We'll continue to speak out in your communities about how addiction is impacting the community, so people will go to the polls looking for a candidate for president who has answers. And yes, they are all talking about it, but who has solutions, who has ideas? Besides, it's easy to say we care about it, but forcing people to dig in a bit and to talk about how they're going to commit to it. It's one thing to say it's a problem. What have they done? How have they demonstrated they care about it? And what are they going to do about it going forward, and trying to drive this to truly a top agenda item in the nation? And I think that's what we need from a presidential candidate.
Let me add, again, to your question specifically on the president's proposal. Today, across the country, the headlines are the White House announces $1 billion investment into this, and the White House will get a chorus of applause and cheers because it comes across, rightfully, understandably so, as a major investment. I serve on the House Appropriations Committee. I did an event back in my district last year talking about, in the current fiscal year budget, what we have done in some key areas. And I'm sorry if this is going to come across partisan, but in the president's current fiscal year budget, not the one he's announced he's going to be introducing, in the current fiscal year budget, we saw the president's budget. We were the first ones to get it and work on it. And we saw that he had dramatic cuts in the HIDA program, dramatic cuts in drug courts, dramatic cuts in drug-free communities program, zeroed out the heroin task force funding. We said no. And not only did we restore the money, we added money to it. We all agree up here on the stage that you've got to make an investment. And while the headlines today will say $1 billion, let's talk about investing in real solutions where they really work. The president came to my state about 2 months ago to talk about the crisis. Fortunately, it is being talked about. We need to make the investment. But while the headlines are impressive today, it's a small down payment on what really needs to be done.
So we're getting close to wrapping here, and I just want to give you all the last opportunity to maybe pitch your favorite piece of legislation.
Thank you.
Talk about what you might ask them to advocate for while they're out there, and maybe mention two things: prospect for overall bipartisan agreement by the end of the Congress, on funding and maybe on the Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act. Will we see that pass? So with that, I think that's going to be our last set of questions. So filibuster if you'd like. We have 7 minutes. And at that point, the gavel drops.
Wait, we all want to know about marijuana, too. I just want you to know that everybody in this room wants to know something about marijuana.
Actually, thank you for bringing that up because I agree. And by the way, I'd like to compliment CADCON, that fantastic presentation yesterday morning that we're able to see from Dr. Madras. That you needed to see this amazing presentation, Harvard doctor, and just talked about how bad marijuana is for the health of the brain, both now and general. You know, it's going to be a generational problem. So if you want to add marijuana into your closing comments, by all means.
I'll start out against marijuana. And so, remember those jails and prisons I've said I've been to and visited? I've also been in juvenile court quite a bit, okay? And let's just all acknowledge that the addiction problems can very much start with the simple use of marijuana, okay? And then the marijuana over time moves on to, back in the 80s, it was cocaine and crack. You know, then in the 2000s, and it was cocaine and crack for a while. Then it's moved to meth, and not that we've solved all of these problems, and we absolutely haven't. But I've got to tell you, DEA told us that prescription drugs were going to be a problem when I was U.S. Attorney, 01 to 07. And it's like, really? And you're learning about kids going, you know, smoking marijuana and doing the pill parties, okay? It all matters. And then now, most of the heroin overdoses, 80% of the people have been addicted to prescription drugs first. And now why is everyone caring? Because they're dying. Because the heroin is so bad, they are dying of those overdoses. And I assure you that those heroin users started at some point with marijuana. And we have to continue to educate about the devastation of starting with marijuana. And people often say, well, it's no more dangerous than alcohol. Well, look what alcohol has done in the country, okay? So it's all connected. It's an addiction. And again, the science is teaching us more. And because people, okay, I enjoy my glass of wine, or I don't enjoy any marijuana, but you do have to educate about what the brain, and I know it's hard, but we got to talk about the brain issues of addiction and helping, and that's what you all do, is that education. We've got to continue to push back. And I hope that the next president of the United States really does focus. It is against the law to be dealing in marijuana, to be using marijuana. And so I am very opposed to those states that are having these debates and pushing on. And so you got to work at those state legislative levels to be pushing back. And I was so proud that Ohio defeated last year. Thank you for defeating, because let me just tell you, and I'm sad that Oregon and those states and Colorado have legalized it. Ohio's real close to Indiana, and so I was so proud of your efforts. So anyway, we got to keep up that fight.
Thank you. Ditto. That's awesome.
Yeah.
3865 is a Cradle Act. This is a streamline the process to create a licensure and a certification process for facilities to be able to take care of our newborn infants suffering the ravages of withdrawal in AS. So I won't take up more than my 30 seconds of the 7 minutes. Thank you again for what you do. I appreciate your work. Look forward to continuing to be one of your champions. Thank you very much.
When we speak to the marijuana issue, we have to be careful not to conflict a message that on addiction that we have been talking about, making certain that we're on board, talking about across the board activities that can weaken the brain or that can inspire additional addiction. So, you know, we need to go forward, I think, with the sound policies that I was mentioning earlier with addiction and alcoholism from our block grants that provide probably 70 to 80% of the monies for our agencies. That can't be cut back. It needs to be increased. We need to continue forward with the efforts for a TREAT Act so that more and more people are available to address those who are addicted by lifting the caps of data 200. We need to train some of the professionals in the medical field better about prescriptions and about addiction. And all of that and more is included in a bill that I've recently put forth with my colleagues that is addressed as the Comprehensive Behavioral Health Reform and Recovery Act. And I believe that that will provide tremendous response to mental health issues, to illnesses and disorders, and to the elements of addiction as a disease, alcoholism as a disease. It's comprehensive, it's all-inclusive, and it partners the field so that we don't talk about them in separate silos, but understand if people aren't getting treatment, oftentimes they will medicate in a way that's abusive to their own health, and knowing that that abuse not only affects the individual, but the ring of loved ones around that individual. So again, thank you. Thank you, Mary, for a great job. Thank you, everyone at CADFA, for the invitation. And let's go and score on behalf of the recovery community. They need our pledge of support and the resources.
Lucille? Okay, well, like my colleagues, I too am opposed to recreational marijuana. And for all the reasons, you know, that Susan and others have given, but also, you know, they always hear, well, but what about alcohol? Well, we don't go and say, oh, it's okay to abuse alcohol. It's okay, you know, to get drunk. But there's only one reason you smoke marijuana for recreational purposes, to get high. And it is not okay to get high. And I don't want to be able to send that message, for example, to my grandchildren that, you know, it's legal, so it's okay. And if you look at what's happening in Colorado, it is not a pretty picture. And I think that they probably regret that they have legalized it, given all the problems, the increases in crime, and all the other things that are happening there right now. And in terms of what I'm hoping that you all will do when you go out to up to the Hill is please talk to them about sponsoring the reauthorization of the STOP Act. The STOP Act is something that, as I mentioned earlier, has been effective. It has helped to bring down the percentage of underage drinking in this country. It reauthorizes the interagency council that brought together all the federal agencies who deal with underage drinking. So now they're working together and focused in a very comprehensive way instead of these agencies going out in different ways. It also reauthorizes the national media campaign that has been directed at educating parents about the dangers of underage drinking. In addition, it continues the research and the data collection by CDC, and it reauthorizes an additional $1 million for the very successful community-based coalition enhancement grants, which many of you have benefited from. And it also modifies the original STOP Act so that the grantees can now partner with institutions of higher education, which is really important. And just finally, there is a new portion which authorizes new grants to assist pediatric provider organizations to educate pediatric health providers on how to identify alcohol abuse among adolescents and make suggestions on how they can help parents to address those issues. So it's a really important bill. You can make it happen again. And I just want to end with just a couple of things. Know that when you go to Capitol Hill, as said by my colleagues, you are there from a position of power. You're not there asking, you know, hat in hand. You're there from a position of power because, as was mentioned earlier, we work for you, your taxes pay our salary, and you can hire and fire us based on your vote. And we're very much aware of that. And I just, again, want to thank Mary She was a champion when we were colleagues in Congress. She was one of the original first persons to support the Stop Act. She works so hard and has continued that work. And I really want to commend you for that, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Well, on that note, on behalf of the CADCO Board of Directors and General Dean, we want to thank our entire panel. It's great to see you again. And I know Susan and Paul are going to stick around and get an award. But thank you very much for being here, and good luck with everybody today on the Hill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Lucille.
Congratulations, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.